was a kid, I spent every Halloween trick-or-treating with my friends Nathan and Jack. Our neighborhood was divided into two subdivisions, separated by a large forested ravine. On Halloween night, 2002, we set out from my parents' house, as we usually did, and hit up a few blocks worth of houses in Nathan and my subdivision before crossing the road past the ravine into Jack's subdivision. We used pillowcases to carry our candy, which were becoming heavier and heavier. Jack was insatiable, however, and as we passed the ravine, we noticed a basket sitting beside the road, and it was full of candy. I didn't notice at the time, but in hindsight, after examining it, all of the candy was egg-shaped. Kinder eggs, other chocolate-wrapped eggs. It actually looked more like an Easter basket than someone's Halloween candy. Jack ran right over to it, picked up the basket, held it up in the air, and claimed the whole thing for himself. Apparently Nathan was equally insatiable, as he quickly took to anger with Jack's possession of the entirety of the basket, demanding that he hand over at least half, if not a third of the candy, to which Jack suggested he go F himself. Nathan took this as an opportunity to get physically aggressive, and charged at Jack with a bloodlust. Jack tried desperately to keep the basket away from Nathan, and then pointed to an egg on the ground. "There, take that one, leave me alone," he whinged. Nathan looked to the ground to see where the basket had been, and sure enough, there lay another Kinder egg. He bent into the brush to pick it up, and seemed satiated for the time being. I caught up with Jack as we began walking past the ravine into the neighborhood. But when we got to the neighborhood, we noticed Nathan was no longer with us. We turned around to see what looked like his bright orange pumpkin costume fading into the forest. Jack and I looked at each other, and then paced back to where we had last seen Nathan. He hadn't actually made it that far in, and we still saw him quite clearly. He was picking up another Kinder egg. Was it the one from before? We wondered. No, it wasn't. In fact, there were a trail of Kinder eggs leading deeper into the woods. "Hey, Nathan, why don't you come back, buddy?" I called to him, but he didn't answer. Then I saw him, or at least I assume it was a he. It was a very tall man, wearing a pink bunny suit, standing with half his body behind a tree, about 5 meters in front of Nathan. Jack and I gasped collectively, but Nathan remained oblivious. The trail of Kinder eggs clearly led right to the man's foot. "Nathan, come back now," I commanded, but to no avail. He continued blindly following the trail like some sort of idiotic cartoon character, head buried in the sand all the way up until he bumped into the man. Jack and I were frozen solid, waiting to see what would happen next. The man stood still. Perhaps because we were watching? I'm not sure to this day. Nathan finally looked up as the trail had ended, and screamed when he realized there was a man standing right in front of him. He bolted backwards, and ran all the way up the ravine, saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," over and over again. Once he caught up with us, we all ran. And once we were in the subdivision, I looked back to see a man in a bunny costume, his hands pushed up together, bounding after us. Maybe it was just some teenager playing a stupid joke, but I still think of that bunny man and all the terror I felt. I have a story about trick-or-treating, or rather, about trick-or-treaters. It was actually after I was too old to go trick-or-treating. I was sitting at home with my mom, kind of bored to be honest. We were having a horror movie marathon and casually answering the door when the bell rang. We have a big bay window by our dining room, and from the living room you can see out of it onto the street. So we had a good idea of when we were about to hear the bell ring. Anyway, we were about to pack it in for the night. It was about 8:30 p.m., For those who don't know, that's quite late for kids to be trick-or-treating. But you always get the odd couple of stragglers. A large group appeared through the window at the edge of the driveway, and I got up and ready to answer the door with the bowl of candy in hand. The doorbell rang, and I opened it, but there was nobody there. I craned my head around the corner to see if they were still in the driveway or trying to play some stupid prank, but there was no trace of them. I was a little creeped out, but it's just kids, and they're playing obviously some kind of prank, so I just let it go, closed the door, put the bowl down, headed back into the living room to continue the marathon. But not a minute later, there was a sudden, loud bang coming from the back window behind us, then the front, then the bedroom windows. The whole house was ringing with knocks and scrapes. Our dog was absolutely losing his shit, as was my mother, who picked the dog up and was desperately trying to console him. I picked up my phone and dialed in 911, but I didn't want to press call yet. I was very much in a fight or flight response, and I went to look out the window to just get a look at these kids and what they were up to. Suddenly, the banging stopped, unanimously. They timed it perfectly. There was silence in the house, but for my dog still barking. Then, my phone began to buzz, still in my hand. It was an unknown number, yet for some reason, I couldn't resist the urge to answer. A grown man with a low voice spoke on the other line. He said 4 words. "The 6 are here." The moment he said it, every window in our house shattered. My mother screamed and let go of the dog, who jumped through the back window. I followed the dog, but there was no one there. I looked as carefully as I could around the backyard, but there was just no one. They were gone. Then I heard my mother calling to me from the kitchen. I came running back in and looked out the front window to see 6 children, all dressed in white, wearing masks, standing in a line, facing away from us at the foot of the driveway. They weren't laughing. They were just still for a moment, and then they all turned and walked away. I still have nightmares about that night. I still wonder why our house was targeted. I wonder who the man on the other line was. I wonder who those kids were. The house has never felt the same to me since, but after we finally moved 2 years ago, I felt a sense of closure. I may never know who those 6 were, but I've made my peace with it. There was this fat, jolly old lady who lived a few doors down from us. She used to babysit us sometimes for my mom, and we never had any problems, and she was great. She would bring us chocolate. She was quite an aficionado of chocolate, actually. She handmade truffles, which isn't an easy thing to do. And every Halloween, she would give them out to the kids, and she made them in 4 flavors, including chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and blueberry. She was pretty well liked in the neighborhood, so parents were a little more lax with her when it came to the rule about not accepting unwrapped candy. That Halloween, my cousin came to visit. My cousin's an only child, and he's a bit of a spoiled kid. His parents came too. They hung out with my mom, and of course my cousin had to come out with me and my brother. We really didn't like him. He always cried and whined to get his way, and he usually would. And as we passed other kids on the street, he would shout out jeers at them, mocking their costumes or the way they walked or the fact that they were younger than him. He was just a real big pain in the ass, and we pretended not to know him when we saw our friends from school. A few doors in, we came to our former babysitter's house. It smelled divine when her door opened, and she came beaming with a great big tray of truffles. She would make this joke every year when we said trick or treat. She would ask for a trick. We normally just kind of awkwardly laughed it off until she gave us our candy. This year, our cousin took a different approach, in the form of pulling his pants down, turning around, mooning the lady, and spanking his own ass. I watched that smile on her face fade quicker than ever. She asked my brother and I what flavor of truffle we wanted. I took strawberry. My brother liked blueberry. She then asked our cousin what flavor he wanted. He yelled out chocolate, making a reference to SpongeBob that the lady didn't understand. The look in her eyes was just death. There was just no light left in them. And she told our cousin that there was no more chocolate left on this tray and that she was going to have to go get another one. My cousin yelled at her to hurry up. My brother and I could not stop cringing. She came back 30 seconds later, no longer carrying a tray, but just with a handful of truffles, which she stuffed directly into our cousin's bag. The rest of the night proceeded as normally as we could have hoped. There were a few other rude remarks to pleasant adults made, but we made it home eventually. The three of us began digging into our candy. We were allowed 10 pieces on Halloween night, and the rest we had to save for later. My cousin started making a squelching noise. His breathing became raspy, and he looked at us with horror in his eyes. With his mouth agape, we could see that it was red. We could also see something shiny peppered throughout it. My aunt came rushing into the room and immediately understood what was happening. Panic ensued, and he was rushed to the hospital with what we later learned were the metal clippings from thumbtacks. Our babysitter was arrested, but died awaiting trial. It was definitely horrific to behold his face in that moment, but I never really felt like he didn't deserve it. I was mostly just shocked that after all this time, our former babysitter had that in her.